All right, so it's been a while. It's been an absolute while. A lot of stuff has happened. This video is aimed mainly at retromillenium. But yeah, this is just canon evidence of Territon levels firepower from Star Destroyers in Star Wars in regards to the Federation from Star Trek versus the Empire from Star Wars. Now, the first thing I want to go over, right, is you've accused me multiple times of being a warzy, right? Like a fanatic, a fanboy. This is absolutely not true. I mean, first of all, right, the first thing I'd like to just say is that, objectively speaking, I think I like Star Trek the original series more than Star Wars. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind. I grew up on Star Trek the original series. Like my memories, right, are of the original series. And of course, I watched the original trilogy as well. I watched the prequel trilogy. I did watch the sequel trilogy. I didn't like it. And again, like going back to this subject that I've been talking about with you, I love Star Trek. I love Picard. I love Captain Kirk. And they're interesting characters, right? And it's the lack of firepower, really, that makes these stories that much more engaging, right? When, when you have Star Wars, which is just completely out there, which is just completely fucking bonkers, right? And you have them doing things like, oh, let's create a fleet of tens of thousands of Star Destroyers, each able to destroy a planet. That's not fucking interesting, man. I'm not interested in watching a movie about that, right? It's not something that makes me go, wow, this is a cool universe. Disney doesn't understand, really, that big explosions doesn't make a story cool. What makes a story cool is character growth and development, right? I loved Rogue One because again, you saw character growth and development. You saw Jyn Erso, and again, like it wasn't a perfect movie. There were plot points that were like just completely confusing or didn't make sense or not logical. But regardless, right, it was the character development, right, that I just loved, right? And Rogue One, by the way, actually had some of the worst firepower feats, anti feats, you would call them. I think they're the only anti feats in Star Wars where you see, torpedoes that ordinarily do a lot more damage do almost nothing to a fucking base. And, it impacts several meters away from Jin and she survives. And it's like, wow, this is completely lowball firepower. But at the end of the day, it was the story itself, right? The quality of the story, the quality of the character development that really, in my opinion, made that movie good, not the firepower. Firepower, I'm not a fanboy of firepower. I'm a fanboy of character development. You see Kirk, one episode, right? There's an asteroid approaching a planet. And again, I watched this several years ago, so my memory's fuzzy, but my memory, if I recall correctly, it was like a planet full of like Native American people, basically. And Captain Kirk goes, and there's an asteroid approaching it, and oh, we can't blow up this asteroid. We have to, figure out how to activate this alien defense system to push away this asteroid, right? If it was, Disney canon, oh, it's just a huge explosion. Oh my God, we made a planet blowing, Star Destroyer, and it just destroyed the asteroid. That's not an interesting thing, right? Again, firepower does not make something good. It doesn't make anything bad. It's possible if you look at, I've been told that the Zeely universe is good despite being, ridiculous in terms of firepower. There have been good books about Warhammer 40K I've read where, even though, hey, we've got planet crackers, they still make good plot points. So the first thing, right, that I'm bringing up, this is box art for Armada right here, that again, the canon status of Armada is disputed, but we're looking at like high gigaton level firepower, right? Just off that. This is from Catalyst on the Bridge of the Executive Tarkin, pacing 100,000 kilometers out. The planet turned. We're looking at explosions that are dissipating in the atmosphere, the upper atmosphere, right? So what does that mean, right? What does that mean? The upper atmosphere is 700 to 10,000 kilometers, right? At a minimum, you would need 30 million megatons of firepower if the explosion refers directly to the fireball, or 30 teratons. 30 teratons. Let me reiterate, 30 teratons to create this kind of explosion, right? The maximum firepower If we're talking about upper atmosphere, the very tip of the upper atmosphere, 70 petatons, which is, a huge range that the firepower could be. But the absolute minimum this firepower, this could represent, assuming this refers to the thermal radiation radius, 20 gigatons, right? Bare minimum. Reasonable estimate, teratons of firepower. Again, catalyst. This is page 140, right? What are we looking at? We see Krennic. They're looking at a battle raging on all sides of a planet, right? So we're looking at warships that are literally, there's so many warships in this battle that it's across the entire planet. And guess what? Explosions are visible from their perspective across the starlight curve of the world, right? Again, we're looking at explosions visible from space. Again, just massive amounts of firepower. Completely ridiculous levels of firepower. Again, what are we looking at? We're looking at, I believe this is from the Resistance show. And again, we're seeing an explosion visible from space. Again, matches up with what we see. An explosion that you can see, and you can see the curve of the planet. This is, again, teratons of firepower. I'm sorry. Explosions, again, visible from space. And it's implied that this isn't even done, intentionally. It might be part of a base Delta Zero operation. It might be just the raw extraction of kyber crystals. And this fits what we see in Ahsoka, the book Ahsoka, where it says a Star Destroyer denudes a landmass, aka strip the crusts off a landmass to allow for easier access to minerals, to the kyber crystals. Rise of the Skywalker novelization. Again, what are we looking at? Hang on a second, I gotta crop this correctly. Tens of thousands, not 10,000, tens of thousands of Star Destroyers. Or massive Star Destroyers, massive planet-killing Star Destroyers. Are you kidding me? This is... Just for reference, right? The original Empire had only, I think it was 25,000 Star Destroyers, man. This is... Why? I don't like this. This is not something that makes me happy. This is not something that, I want, really, in the sense that, oh my god, oh, look at all these gigatons, oh, planet destroyers, exotons. It's completely irrelevant, man. I don't care. I just don't. But you're arguing that the Federation can beat this? That the Federation can beat a faction that, by the time the Federation, because the Federation's faster than light and so slow. We see Janeway from that awful series, taking decades to crawl across the galaxy. Decades! I'll go into Star Destroyer speed feats in a second, but these are all quotes from the new Star. This is the book that you were talking about. Again, main reactor is annihilating 2,300 tons of fuel per second, 12,000, magnitude 10 earthquakes, which is 15 gigatons, by the way, 15 gigatons of energy for a single cannon. Oh my god, dude. That's not even the most ridiculous thing in that book, by the way. It gets up to... Let me just pull up the picture. Right? So, a Venator-class Star Destroyer. Here's what I want you to look at, right? Can feed almost its entire reactor output to its heavy guns when required. Now, how much is that reactor output? Why, that main reactor can annihilate up to 40,000 tons of fuel per second. Do you know what that is? That is hundreds of teratons of energy. That equivalent to a, magnitude 10 earthquake, That's assuming that it refers just to the raw like energy, not the effects. Because we know that turbo lasers, when you fire them, it's thermal energy. It's not very good at like creating shock waves. It's completely reasonable to estimate even higher than uh, gigatons of energy. But we're looking at the Venator, which is supposed to be, roughly equivalent, 40,000 tons of fuel per second, teratons of energy being generated per, not just teratons, hundreds of teratons of energy being generated per second. And guess what? Almost all of it can go to its heavy guns. This is so ridiculous. It's just so much worse, man. This isn't even going into hyperspace ramming. We know that ships can ram hyperspace. I think it's from Tarkin that we see they talk about hyperspace rams which shake an entire planet to its core. I don't even want to like talk about this, man. And then not even hyperspace. Look. A Venator class Star Destroyer, what do you think its maximum acceleration is? 3,000 Gs. 3,000! It could quite literally reach light speed in like not even a massive amount of time. It wouldn't even take a large amount of time for it to reach light speed. It would take, I think, what, hours? And not just that. The amount of energy needed to power those engines to propel that ship forward at that rate would be quite literally teratons of energy per second, which again fits with the reactor, which again fits with how much energy is being put out by the reactor. And again, the engines, you might not be able to divert all your energy to engines, right? So this is conservative again, and you can dump all those teratons into uh, your heavy guns if you want. Teratons of energy. Oh my god! Just think this used to be insane. Like people were shitting themselves over 200 gigaton acclimators. No, teratons. Hundreds of teratons. Come on, this is ridiculous. Do you know who was in charge of this? Curtis Saxon was in charge of writing this book, by the way. Curtis Saxon was one of the people who was on the debate forums, basically arguing for, those 200 gigatons that everyone likes to shit themselves over. And he's now writing canon for Star Wars, man. This just gets worse and worse, And it's not just him. There's other writers that were participating in the debates. This is insane. Why would you even argue this? I don't understand. I just don't. Oh, we've already gone over this. We've already gone over the different blast intensities, variable firepower. You literally have dial a yield. You literally have dial a yield. From Thrawn, we see polishing a, what is it, moon? Polishing a moon. Moons like Endor, nearly Earth-sized moons, would be. But I mean, this, regardless of how you want to interpret it, oh, it's actually referring to a moon like the moons of Mars, Phobos. Oh my God, it's no. We have raw, hard teratons. Just from this alone, in conjunction with this, that's teratons, hundreds of teratons per second. This right here, three three heavy turbo lasers. These are XX9s. These are come standard on every Star Destroyer. That. Do you know what that is? That is hundreds of gigatons per turbo laser. This isn't accounting for the fact we know from, I believe it was Thrawn, that turbo lasers decrease in firepower over range. So these are probably teratons of firepower if you're right in their faces. But whatever, who cares? This is all completely irrelevant, man. I just don't care. Initials into bedrock, that's a lot of firepower. Oh my god. tsunamis. Oh my god. Look, this is here. Let me just really get this zoom in. Just really zoom in. What do we see here? What do we see here? What do we see? What are we looking at? We're looking at Argentines class cruisers, I believe they are. And what do they do? What do you think these Argentines class cruisers do? We can see the curvature of the planet right here. They shoot, and these explosions are visible from space. But whatever, who cares? The Death Star. Oh my god, this massive, huge thing. Guess what? The rebels didn't even know. There's no hard evidence for an interplanetary engineering project consuming Imperial resources on a massive scale. Oh, Death Star casually constructing a thing 100 miles across. Who cares, man? Oh, God. Laying waste to continents, ruining planets. I just don't care. Orbital bombardment, tectonic spasms. Who cares? Bombing a planet to smithereens. This isn't. Tarkin himself says these cave crackers, these mining charges, will tear this planet open like a rotten fruit. And guess what the inhabitants of the planet do? Do you know what the planet's inhabitants do? An explosion goes off in the heart of the planet. The entire world shudders. And the entire world just explodes. Yeah. Because the inhabitants were like, nope, fuck you, Empire. You don't get to win. I'm going to do this shit myself. Now, again, according to like speed, right? Well, let's get into speed feats. Parsecs in a blink. At a bare minimum, assuming this is 2 parsecs and a blink is a second, we're looking at 6 light years. 6 light years per second. You can do the math on how many. You know what? I just don't care. I can't be bothered. 6 light years in a second. This is like hours to cross a galaxy. So we're looking at, but again, we're looking at a ship. I would call this absolute maximum speed because Vader's on board. I would assume the captain of the ship is like, oh my god, he's going as fast as he's redlining his engines, right? If we look at other feats, Star Destroyers seem to be more in the weak range. I'm not going to say that this can be maintained for any period of time, right? More reasonable to say that it would take about a week or two for a Star Destroyer to cross a galaxy, right? And this fits in with slower ships that we see in terms of scouting. Let's how do you want the Federation to be fighting the Empire? Let's say that the Rebel Alliance just magically disappears, the Hutt just magically disappear. The Empire and the Federation's galaxies are being teleported side by side. We take out the Q, we take out all these other factions. It's the Federation versus the Empire, right? The Empire launches, we'll see probe droids into this unknown region. They don't do that. The Empire launches probe droids, hyperspace-equipped little pods that we see in Rebels, yeah. And just figures out where everything is, uses sensors, whatever, to figure out where these Federation planets are. Even if we assume that the Galactic Empire doesn't have any guns in their ships, they could just ram every single ship in the Federation, or every single planet in the Federation. 2,500 Star Destroyers. Compare that to, 150 main member planets? Every single member planet in the Federation could be destroyed. And at the peak of the Federation, and this is in the future, I'm not sure if this is in the future, the Federation's peak is listed as 350 planets. So anywhere from 150 to 350 member planets is what we're looking at, right? We'll just say 2,000 or 250 planets. The Empire can literally spend 1 out of 10 Star Destroyers and shatter and just shake the core of each Federation planet using hyperspace ramming in about, we'll say it takes the Empire a year to explore the Federation's galaxy, compared to whatever 4 hours to cross the galaxy. Yeah, it's going to take a year. Sure, whatever. Who cares? How long would it take the Federation to reach the Empire? Decades just to cross a portion of the galaxy. So we'll say what, a century or two to even get to Coruscant? So the crew of these Federation starships will be dead. I don't care. Oh my god, man. And then by the time they reach the Empire would have already died. If we say that the rebels are still in the First Order, the Empire would have gathered the technology of the First Order, gotten there without the rebels' interference. You would Starkiller Base, man. Just even if we say, okay, we'll take out hyperspace ramming, we'll take out all these, guns off these Star Wars ships, Starkiller Base. Because again, the Empire would have quite literally decades before the Federation even, like, their first vessels even arrive into the Empire space. What are we looking at? We're looking at Starkiller Base. We're looking at Zystons. Tens of thousands of Zystons. Tens! I'm just curious, Retro Millennium. How do you think the Federation would win? They can't even reach anything in the Empire. They have no way of defending their planets against hyperspace ramming or just regular ramming. The impact of a Venator at near light speed after we'll say it drops out near the edge of the system and just accelerates towards the planet at 3,000 Gs. Near light speed eventually is what it's going to reach, delivering what, massive amounts of firepower just from the RAM itself. I'm sorry, man. Listen, you're arguing for something you just can't win. I'm sorry. Like, what do you want me to say to you? Like, listen, the only I can I played Star Trek Online, right? You had ships that could cross the galaxy in I think it was like minutes. If you ground, played, bought the highest tier ships. Yeah, no, I didn't do that, but I had a friend who did play it. I quit because of the constant updates, but I want you to just think. Like, I mean, the game's not canon, by the way, but if it was, yeah, sure, that could defeat the Empire if you're looking at Terraton level firepower from the starships, which again you could kind of extrapolate. Star Trek does have a lot of negative feats, but again, technological advancement. I'm not going to count a negative feat from the original series uh, against the Federation. When you look at, like, for example, Deep Space Nine, we do see things that are like just so far ahead of the original series. We see technologies like that are just so far ahead. It's like, yeah, that's a lot of technological innovation. Like if you put like even Picard era Federation against the Empire, they're just not going to win. They wouldn't be able to even reach the Empire. Whereas the Empire would be free to just ram ship after ship into the planets of the Federation. Like, I'm sorry, that's just how it is. The Federation doesn't win no matter what. But that doesn't affect the quality of the shows. You know what I'm saying? I still like Star Trek more. I still hate Star Wars. Like, the sequel trilogy, just complete garbage. But that doesn't change the fact that, objectively speaking, the Federation wins. Or loses. Oh my god, dude. I'm just so tired. I am so tired. I don't want to debate. It's just, there's nothing to debate. I'm sorry. Good game. Goodbye. Or upload another video on some other topic in several years from now. I don't care.